something Americans don't recognize. When they say big government, we've got to cut it down, they never consider the military a part of the government. They consider it as some kind of independent, patriotic, service to the country and nobility and all the rest of it. And at the same time, the military, as I say, is a constituent element and, of course, provides a crucial part of the dynamic that I associate with inverted totalitarianism. But again, it's the absolute inability of ordinary citizens to grasp what is at stake when we talk about the military in their present terms, because they only know it as sons and daughters who are patriotically doing their duty, or people who have unfortunately been killed in combat, so that the notion of the military for them has a kind of sort of antique character, whereas its actual character is streamlined, technologically advanced, and as much a part of the corporate structure as any other element.
That said, historically, it has been the Democrats who have shown the initial opposition to the wars, and also various religious leaders like the Berrigan brothers, and a lot of religious orders have gone to the front of the line saying we're against the particular war, like the war in Vietnam. Mm-hmm. Today, I don't see any massive demonstrations against the war, in any national protests by the Democrats or the Republicans. Why aren't we protesting this absolute insanity in Afghanistan and the irresponsibility of thinking and trying to convince ourselves, the world, that we have won a victory against terrorism in Iraq, when everything about this has been a complete disaster?
Well, my short answer is the one we briefly mentioned, which is fear. People are concerned about jobs, they're concerned about immediate things, they're concerned about terrorism, they're concerned about homegrown dangers, so that the notion of the ability of people to think beyond what these things are doing to them is I think at the heart of the matter. People are, in a certain sense, demobilized by the role of terror. It forces people to turn away from the public domain, to be concerned with themselves, and of course economic depression contributes to that. It gives them an immediate worry, and very tangible worry, very important worry, but one that again takes their mind off these larger events that are occurring and shaping the fate of the country. It's a situation where the citizenry is so disconnected now, and where the reality of what's taking place is so distorted and so filled with the kind of venom of the talk show host that most people either get turned off or are turned on in the wrong direction. It's a very, very difficult situation.
Well, let me understand this and put this in a way that I could understand what you're saying. You've just spoken about what distinguishes inverted totalitarianism from past totalitarian government is that the latter mobilizes the population to enact the nation's mission, such as Hitler's goals of world domination, whereas the inverted totalitarianism seeks to demobilize the citizenry. Absolutely. And allows people to hold on to the apparition that they are living in a democracy. So would you then expand on this and relate it to what we are witnessing now with a charged radical right that is really steaming over what I consider inane issues, when in fact there should be an outcry against Wall Street, the bailout, the huge lobby industry buying up Washington and influencing legislative policies, and the wars in the Middle East that are further bankrupting this nation, and our extreme bias in how we're approaching the Israeli and Palestinian issues. And why do you believe the outcry against the more important corporate developments, the result of unbridled, unregulated free market capitalist theory, is so mute compared to the outcry in the 60s for the civil rights and against the Vietnam War? In short, where has the democratic consciousness gone today?
Well, I think it's become either co-opted or it's been transformed. I mean, you look at the major instruments that were available 50 or 60 years ago for voicing protest, for organizing people, and they're simply not there any longer. The universities have been transformed. I think that's one of the most important stories of our time. The universities have now become so dependent upon corporate money, and basically corporate money as well as, of course, taxpayer money in the case of public universities. But their independence is just really gone by the wayside, and you can see it in terms of the decline of certain intellectual fields in the academy. Fields like political science and sociology, which had been important critical elements in the 60s revolt, are really now nothing like what they were before. They're either technical or they're so preoccupied with problems that really have very little to do with everyday politics. So that the role of the universities is an indicator of what has transpired in the way of the decline and fall of alternative institutions, or institutions where alternative visions were spun, so that the whole thing is of such a different order of magnitude now that one hardly knows where to begin in order to chart the transformations of institutions that used to be on the cutting edge of change and on the cutting edge of democracy. And certainly the universities are a prime example, but so is the important role of of an opposition party. It's just not what it used to be, and and these transformations have gone in so many different directions. You take the Republican Party itself. In the 1950s, the Republican Party was not the party of empire, not the party of expansionism, but the party of isolationism, of the party of small government in the literal sense, and was anti-military to a significant degree, in terms at least of its willingness to sponsor huge expenditures for armaments. So that in the case of the Republican Party, you can chart the literal changes that have taken place in major political institutions, not just universities, but the political parties themselves, and you can also see it in the role of our major national institutions. The presidency has become something very different from what it was before, and the way in which it operates in reference to constitutional law is profoundly different. I mean, you take, for example, the scandal that was of oversigning statements, in which presidents proceeded to in effect add their amendments to congressional laws, whereby they stated their interpretations regarding certain provisions of the law, and in effect they amended the legislative process. Now again, this was a practice that had existed from almost the beginnings of the Republic, but like so many things, you get a transformation that occurs when a practice becomes a sort of epidemic, where you have hundreds of signing statements and not just one or two. And incidentally, Obama has continued that same practice, so that we see in these kind of developments the way in which institutions which were like the presidency, like Congress, like the political parties, which had originally been part of a system in which you try to make power responsible, right? Try to democratize it, have just been transformed into something very, very different.
I appreciate that statement. We're coming near the end of our program, and I have just two more questions for you,
sure.
and one a short comment I would like for you to respond to. I went back through Obama's voting record when he was in the legislature in Illinois, and then when he was a freshman senator. And virtually every major piece of legislation that he voted for was pro-major corporations. He was pro-nuclear, pro-King coal, pro-continuing strip mining in the Appalachians, pro the military-industrial complex. I didn't see the law